Chapter 1. A Scholar's Beginning, the Early Life of Samuel Johnson. Samuel Johnson's origins, rooted in the quiet town of Lichfield, Staffordshire, emerge as a testament to the interplay of adversity and aspiration. Born on September 18, 1709, to Michael Johnson, a bookseller and stationer of solid yet unspectacular means, and Sarah Johnson, a woman noted for her intelligence and resilience, the young Samuel entered a world far removed from the bustling literary salons of London. He would one day dominate. Lichfield, although provincial, provided a fertile ground for the nurturing of intellect, owing much to the resourcefulness embedded in his family life from the very first days. Johnson's life was shadowed by illness. He was born a sickly child, suffering from scrofula, then commonly referred to as the king's evil, a tuberculous infection of the lymph nodes. His mother's fears and hopes mingled as Samuel underwent the royal touch, a traditional rite believed to impart healing from the monarch, in this case Queen Anne. Though the gesture failed to eradicate the disease, it underscored the desperation and faith of Johnson's family as they navigated the precariousness of 18th century health care. The resulting facial scarring and partial deafness were physical reminders of his battles, yet they also contributed to the aura of otherness that would mark his presence throughout life. Education from the outset was both a luxury and a necessity. Michael Johnson, for all his limited fortune, bestowed upon his son an invaluable gift: unrestricted access to books. The family shop became Samuel's sanctuary, where he voraciously consumed everything from Latin poetry to English sermons. His precocity quickly outpaced the provincial curriculum of Lichfield's free grammar school, where, under the stern but insightful guidance of masters like John Hunter, Johnson's command of Latin and classical literature blossomed. That Latin, indeed, became less a school subject and more a second-tongue, a lens through which he could engage with the intellectual giants of antiquity. Yet Johnson's academic life was not without its tribulations. Frequent illnesses and recurrent melancholy or gloom, as he would later call it, often interrupted his studies. Behind the figure of the budding scholar loomed the threat of poverty. The Johnson household, though respectable, wrestled with debts and the unpredictability of the book trade. Michael Johnson's periodic failures in business were viewed with concern and, at times, embarrassment by the younger Samuel, who internalized a sense of insecurity that would haunt him throughout his financial dealings in adulthood. Despite these challenges, Samuel's prodigious intellect shone. Memories of the period abound with anecdotes of the boy's wit and memory. It was said he could recite entire passages of Latin and English verse before his peers and elders alike. Sarah Johnson's unwavering faith in her son helped stiffen his resolve, allowing him to transcend, at least temporarily, the limitations imposed by his environment. By his late teens, Johnson had already outgrown what Lichfield could offer. The desire for advanced study, and perhaps for social advancement, led to his admission to Pembroke College, Oxford, in 1728. This transition signaled not simply a geographical shift, but an intellectual awakening, the promise of wider horizons and the latent anxiety of leaving the familiar behind. At Oxford, Johnson's reputation as a classical scholar grew, yet financial strain, persistent illness, and a deep-seated melancholy would again test the very foundations laid in his Lichfield youth. Thus, Johnson's early years, chronicled here in detail, are best understood not as a mere preamble, but as the crucible in which his formidable intellect was forged. The interplay of familial affection and personal adversity, provincial constraint and scholarly ambition shaped the lens through which he viewed the world and, ultimately, the English language itself. Chapter 2. Hardships, Illness, and Unbreakable Will. The path of Samuel Johnson from the narrow, uneven streets of Lichfield to the scholarly environs of Oxford is illuminated as much by his struggles as by his strengths. Johnson's physical ailments were visible from an early age, distinguishing him among his peers. Scrofula left its mark not only on his features, but also on his self-perception. His tall, ungainly frame, his impaired sight and hearing, and the persistent tics that historians later recognized as symptoms of Tourette's syndrome, all combined to create a persona at once daunting and vulnerable. But it was Johnson's response to these hardships that provides true insight into his character. Throughout his youth and into his adult life, Johnson suffered from what he termed the black dog of melancholy, or profound depression that today we perceive in more clinical terms. In his era, however, mental illness was poorly understood. There existed little compassion or remedy for those afflicted with such maladies. Instead, the heavy veil of religious doubt and social stigma often clouded the experience of depression. Johnson's burden was twofold: the struggle for physical health and the daily battle against a morbid, intrusive melancholy. His education at Pembroke College, Oxford, unfolded under this shadow. From the outset, Johnson was beset by financial difficulty. While his intellect made a deep impression on his tutors, his family's resources could not sustain his collegiate ambitions. He was often forced to walk rather than ride. His worn clothing betrayed his circumstances. He was accustomed to hunger, to cold, and to the silent condescension that poverty brought among the more affluent students. Letters home reveal his acute anxiety about finances, his sense of obligation to his parents, and his chronic fear of failure. Yet the adversity he faced produced in Johnson a remarkable stubbornness, a refusal to capitulate to fate or to the limitations others would assign him. He wrote widely, read voraciously, and astounded his contemporaries with the breadth of his erudition. The sheer volume of work that Johnson managed under considerable personal distress is a testament to his indomitable will. While he could not complete his Oxford degree due to lack of funds, it was at Pembroke that he composed some of his earliest verses, including the Latin poem Messiah, a translation of Alexander Pope's work. The poem, sent to Pope himself, was met with high praise, signaling Johnson's entry into the wider literary world. Johnson's relationship with faith was another crucible. Enduring personal suffering prompted him to wrestle with questions of providence and moral order. This struggle manifested in a religious sensibility both rigorous and anxious. Johnson was not content with easy platitudes. Instead, he relentlessly examined his own shortcomings, seeking solace in prayer and self-discipline. His journals and diaries reveal a man beset by scruples, perpetually worried about wasted time, unfulfilled duties, and his ultimate salvation. Johnson's social relationships, too, were marked by the peculiarities of his position. His wit and conversational prowess attracted the attention and loyalty of friends, but his physical mannerisms and moodiness could alienate casual acquaintances. He oscillated between moments of profound intimacy and periods of isolation. His personality as mercurial as his health. His friendship with Edmund Hector, for example, provided emotional support through the Oxford years, a companionship marked by laughter, mutual respect, and occasionally by misunderstandings born of Johnson's introspective disposition. In retrospect, Johnson's years of hardship laid the foundation for his subsequent achievements. Where another might have succumbed to despair, Johnson instead nurtured a stoic resilience. He drew from pain a clarity of purpose, determining that, regardless of circumstance, he would stake his life on the life of the mind. The fortitude that would later carry him through monumental literary projects was, in truth, tested and tempered by the adversities of youth. The lessons Johnson absorbed during these early trials extended beyond his own experience. They informed his empathy for others, his skepticism of easy wisdom, and his passion for moral and intellectual improvement. The struggle was, for Johnson, as much internal as external, a lifelong contest with the self, waged on the battlegrounds of body and spirit. It is in this contest that we find the roots of his greatness, and the shadowed soil from which the flowers of his achievement would one day spring. Chapter 3: The Formative Years, Lichfield to Oxford. The journey from Lichfield to Oxford marks the transitional axis of Samuel Johnson's formative years, a passage that not only enlarged his world, but also intensified his personal conflicts. These years were characterized by both acquisition and loss, the accumulation of knowledge and ambition, and a gradual realization of the personal and social obstacles that would define much of his later life. Lichfield, Johnson's birthplace, was a small intellectual hub by 18th century standards. The town's literary life revolved primarily around its cathedral close, the grammar school, and the households of local gentry. This environment, while limited in scale, provided an environment in which Johnson's intellect was at once set apart and nurtured. His voracious reading habits found ample fuel in his father's book-selling business, which, despite its financial instability, connected the Johnson household to the broader literary currents of the day. Works of theology, philosophy, and the classics left an indelible imprint on the young scholar's mind. In this environment, Johnson absorbed not just knowledge, but also a sense of the possibilities and limitations afforded by provincial life. At the Lichfield Grammar School, Johnson's abilities were quickly recognized. He developed a taste for debate and exposition, relishing opportunities to display his mastery of Latin and Greek. The academic training was rigorous and classical, emphasizing not only rote learning but also composition and critical analysis, the very tools that would later fuel Johnson's essays and lexicographical endeavors. Stories from his classmates recount both admiration and a kind of awe for Johnson's ability to commit enormous quantities of verse to memory and to argue with masterful logic. Yet even here, the seeds of loneliness were sown. His singular talents set him apart, even as they laid the groundwork for his future leadership in literary circles. The transition to Oxford was momentous. Pembroke College, though small, represented a gateway to the wider world of scholarship and intellectual exchange. Johnson entered the college in 1728, buoyed by high hopes but dogged by persistent worries about money and health. Soon after his arrival, these spectres became all too real. The cost of university living, a constant pressure over books, clothing, food, and heating was a recurring theme in Johnson's correspondence. Financial support from Michael Johnson was erratic at best, and after a short time, Samuel was compelled to leave Oxford without a degree, his academic promise unfulfilled. Nevertheless, the intellectual atmosphere of Oxford left a profound mark on Johnson's sensibilities. He was exposed more intimately to currents in philosophy, theology, literature, and the nascent sciences. The university's aging halls and the lively conversations in its common rooms provided both a sense of tradition and an impetus for innovation. Here, Johnson encountered the works of Locke, Milton, and Bacon, as well as the polemics of religious controversy that sharpened his critical faculties. It was at Oxford that he began contemplating issues of language and meaning, formulating questions about usage, precision, and clarity that would later animate his dictionary project. Amidst these advantages, Johnson encountered deep personal challenges. His poverty was a source of public discomfort. He wore threadbare clothing and sometimes went hungry. Socially, he was acutely aware of his outsider status. This discomfort was compounded by his physical disabilities, which drew stares and whispered commentary. Isolation was often his companion, driving him further into books and introspection. Yet, from this adversity, Johnson fashioned a kind of defensive wit and a lifelong suspicion of the pretensions of class and privilege. His spiritual life during these years deepened as well. Confronted by his own suffering and the suffering of those around him, Johnson turned frequently to prayer and religious reading. Unlike some of his contemporaries, his faith was marked not by complacency but by restless inquiry and anguished self-examination. The combination of intellectual ambition and moral anxiety fueled his later writings, particularly in his essays on conduct, duty, and the nature of human happiness. Ultimately, Johnson's time at Oxford was both a blessing and a curse. It failed to provide the material security and social validation for which he longed, but it furnished him with a network of intellectual frameworks and literary ambitions that would persist throughout his life. In the years following his departure from Oxford, while forced to teach and translate for meager wages, Johnson's mind never ceased laboring over the questions first planted in these formative years. The chapter closes with Johnson's return to Lichfield, now as an embattled young adult, uncertain of his prospects but fortified by a will honed in the crucible of adversity. Chapter 4, A Pen for Survival, Johnson's Struggle as a Writer. After the disappointment at Oxford, Samuel Johnson's life entered a new phase defined by economic hardship, restless ambition, and the uncertain hope of establishing himself as a man of letters. The world into which Johnson stepped was one where education did not guarantee employment, and talent alone was not enough to secure literary fame or financial comfort. The struggle to survive by his pen became both a daily reality and a crucible shaping the form and content of his early writings. On leaving Oxford, Johnson returned home, facing a household burdened by debt and diminished expectation. The prospects for steady, respectable employment were slim. Attempts to secure one brought him only limited success. He briefly worked as an usher to school in Market Bosworth, an experience both humiliating and frustrating. The position was far beneath his abilities, and his colleagues, sensing his intellectual arrogance and awkwardness, extended little warmth. It was a period marred by loneliness and the sense of wasting his potential. During these years, Johnson translated works, wrote essays, and reviews for local patrons and periodicals. Though these efforts were barely remunerative, they laid the technical groundwork of his prose style and his reputation for intellectual rigor. Johnson's writing during this period was direct, muscular, and tinged with moral urgency. For Johnson, the pen was not simply a tool, but a weapon and means to assert himself against obscurity and penury. The content of his early writings reveals a man eager to engage with pressing philosophical and social debates. He tackled themes of virtue, faith, and conduct, frequently adopting a stance of robust skepticism toward both fashionable cynicism and empty piety. Health and poverty conspired against him. Malnourished and frequently ill, Johnson struggled to maintain the discipline necessary for sustained literary production. Yet he persisted, honing his abilities in the crucible of necessity. To supplement his scant earnings, Johnson embarked on the daunting project of translating Jerimo Lobo's A Voyage to Abyssinia, an assignment that tested his endurance and resourcefulness. He also began work on his first major poem, London, a biting satire modeled after Juvenal, identifying for the first time the distinctive cadence and philosophical bite that would become his literary trademark. Johnson's moral and intellectual independence, already evident in his youth, fully matured during this struggle for survival. He rejected the easy cynicism of literary hacks and the servile complacency of court poets. Rather, he insisted, often at great cost, on the right to intellectual autonomy. This commitment sometimes brought him into conflict with patrons or editors, further isolating him from conventional opportunities for security. Yet it conferred upon his writing the integrity and vitality that distinguished him among contemporaries. Amid hardship, Johnson's inner life sustained him. He cultivated relationships with a small circle of friends and correspondents, maintaining an intense routine of reading and self-examination. His marriage in 1735 to Elizabeth Porter, a widow nearly 20 years his senior, provided emotional stability and a degree of material support. Though the union was not without its difficulties, the Porters' financial resources enabled Johnson to establish, briefly, an academy in Edial, near Lichfield, where he taught a handful of pupils, including the young David Garrick. The academy was short-lived, but this period was rich with creative ferment and influenced Johnson's vision of what education and intellectual formation should accomplish. Throughout these years, Johnson's sense of purpose became ever more intertwined with his vocation as a writer. Even as he suffered setbacks, he clung to the conviction that language and literature were arenas for the exercise of both intellect and virtue. In the essays and poems of this period, one sees the germinating principles that would guide his later, greater works: clarity, precision, moral seriousness, and an unwavering belief in the power of ideas to shape lives. The closing of this chapter marks Johnson's decision to leave the provinces for London. This was no mere change of scenery, but a leap into a fiercely competitive and often unforgiving literary marketplace. In the metropolis, Johnson would confront new temptations, new challenges, and eventually the opportunity to realize his full powers as the preeminent man of letters of his century. Chapter 5: London Calling, Entering the Literary Battlefield. When Samuel Johnson descended upon London in the early 1730s, he brought with him not only limited means but also boundless ambition. Raised in Lichfield, the son of a bookseller and marked by physical maladies that dogged him from birth, Johnson possessed an intellect and resolve that could not be contained by provincial life. London, the epicenter of Enlightenment thought, beckoned as both an opportunity and a crucible battlefield where literary fortunes were won and lost every day. The London that greeted Johnson was a city in the throes of rapid transformation. Its sprawling streets and coffee houses hummed with intellectual energy, theatres thrived, and the pulse of journalism, art, and politics quickened with the march of progress. For aspiring writers, London was a realm of possibility and peril. Patronage was scarce, infighting was rife, and financial instability loomed over every venture. The literary marketplace itself was fragmented, divided among publishers who rarely extended the same opportunities to new talents as they did to established authors. Johnson arrived impoverished and immediately acquainted with hardship. He slept in garrets, subsisted on modest meals, and took up hackwork to make ends meet. Yet, he found fortitude in adversity, transforming his pen into an instrument of survival as well as self-expression. The city's intellectual density did not diminish his aspiration. Rather, it drove him to hone his craft with renewed intensity. Initially, Johnson struggled to secure steady employment. His first major commission, the play Irene, languished for years in gestation before finally reaching the stage, only to receive tepid reviews. But this experience did not deter Johnson. Instead, he focused his energies on the publication of essays, translations, and occasional poems, each a step toward recognition. The establishment of periodicals, such as the Gentleman's Magazine, provided an early outlet for his writings, where his contributions under pseudonyms gradually drew the attention of discerning readers. As Johnson built relationships in London's literary circles, his reputation grew. He engaged in vibrant correspondence with Charles Cave and Richard Savage, both of whom encouraged and challenged him intellectually. These exchanges gradually led to introductions among more established writers and critics, a vital network for any aspiring literary figure in the city. The literary battlefield of London was not only a site for professional advancement, but also a proving ground for philosophical ideals. Johnson's writings from this era already betray a keen engagement with moral and social issues. His essays frequently dwelled on subjects such as poverty, virtue, and the human condition, issues that he himself wrestled with. As he navigated the uncertainties of urban life, Johnson's approach to literature was fortified by classical influences, especially the works of Pope, Dryden, and Addison. Their styles and philosophies shaped his understanding of what writing could achieve, infusing his prose with elegance and depth. At the same time, Johnson sought to move beyond the conventions of earlier generations, aspiring to infuse literature with an ethical seriousness he found lacking in many contemporary works. The challenge Johnson faced was not merely one of economic survival, it was a battle for intellectual authenticity in a city teeming with commercial interests. He resisted the temptation to pander to popular tastes, instead embracing the role of a thinker committed to truth and rigor. This resolve marked his early works and set the stage for his later, more sustained achievements. The world of letters in London thus became Johnson's crucible. Each hardship was met with reflection, each opportunity with diligence. The city's incessant movement, its blend of chaos and brilliance, spurred Johnson to create works that sought not mere entertainment, but enlightenment. The seeds of his future greatness were sown in these years spent reading voraciously, observing keenly, and writing persistently. In sum, Samuel Johnson's arrival in London marks the emergence of a mind willing to confront the complexities of the literary battlefield. The city, with all its perils and promises, became both adversary and instructor, pushing Johnson to transcend the limitations of circumstance and, ultimately, to become one of the defining voices of his age. Chapter 6: The Birth of a Great Mind, Friendship with David Garrick. It is impossible to chart Samuel Johnson's formative years in London without considering the profound influence of David Garrick. Their friendship, which blossomed in the crucible of shared adversity, stands as one of the great intellectual partnerships of 18th century England. The bond between Johnson and Garrick was forged in their youth in Lichfield, where a mutual quest for knowledge and accomplishment united them. Despite differences in personality and ambition, David Garrick, lively and self-assured, was a foil to Johnson's often solemn and contemplative disposition, whereas Johnson grappled with introspection and the weight of existential questions. Garrick radiated energy, wit, and charm, a combination that would later revolutionize the English stage. Their migration to London together in 1737 symbolized a joint venture into the heart of literary and theatrical possibility, though each would ultimately follow a divergent path to fame. Living modestly and facing the trials of a new city, Johnson and Garrick sustained each other through mutual encouragement and camaraderie. Their shared lodgings became a locus for spirited debate, humor, and creative brainstorming. Johnson, older and more philosophical, provided Garrick with intellectual discipline, while Garrick's vivacity and social acumen enriched Johnson's perspective, introducing him to the subtleties of performance and public perception. It is during this period that the foundations of Johnson's greatness were laid. Garrick's burgeoning career as an actor and theatre manager exposed Johnson to the intricacies of dramatic composition and audience engagement. Their exchanges on literary theory, the function of drama, and the role of criticism fostered Johnson's critical faculties and deepened his appreciation of literature's performative dimensions. Perhaps most importantly, Garrick's friendship imbued Johnson with the confidence to persist despite limited recognition and persistent hardship. Johnson's own health challenges, combined with rejection by publishers and the slow progress of Irene, could have led to resignation. Instead, Garrick's optimism and success acted as both a counterbalance and a stimulus, pushing Johnson to persevere and innovate. Yet their relationship was not immune to tension. As Garrick ascended to the heights of theatrical stardom, Johnson occasionally voiced frustration at the disproportionate acclaim his friend received. He famously declared that Garrick had not made a better play than Irene, a comment both pointed and revealing of Johnson's complex attitudes toward fame, success, and artistic merit. Nevertheless, such moments of rivalry were ultimately transcended by their enduring mutual respect and affection. The intellectual exchanges between Johnson and Garrick during these formative years influenced the development of Johnson's distinctive style of thought. Their discussions reinforced Johnson's belief in literature as a moral enterprise, one capable of instructing audiences, shaping character, and reflecting the depth of human experience. Garrick's use of theatre to capture the public's imagination validated Johnson's conviction that literature could and should engage with the most profound issues of its time. As Johnson established his reputation through essays and poems, Garrick's rise in the theatrical world brought both material and reputational rewards. Johnson's critical insights into theatre and drama found a receptive audience in Garrick's circle, while Johnson's own works benefited from the exposure garnered through Garrick's influence. The friendship, in sum, was a rare and fruitful convergence of creative energies. In examining Johnson's connection to Garrick, one perceives the dynamics of mentorship, rivalry, and collaboration that underpinned the birth of a great mind. Without Garrick's friendship, Johnson's journey might have lacked the necessary spark to ignite his intellectual ambitions fully. Indeed, the partnership endowed Johnson with a sense of belonging in the cultural milieu of London, a foundation from which his greatest accomplishments could emerge. Ultimately, the story of Johnson and Garrick is one of mutual shaping. Each man, though destined for distinct spheres of influence, contributed immeasurably to the intellectual and artistic landscape of their age. Their relationship underscores the vital importance of friendship in the formation of talent, a lesson as resonant today as it was in the bustling heart of 18th century London. Chapter 7, The Rambler, Shaping English Morality and Thought. In the vast panorama of 18th century periodical literature, few publications equaled the enduring impact of The Rambler. Initiated by Samuel Johnson in 1750 and sustained across 2 years, The Rambler stands as a testament to Johnson's commitment to elevating literary standards and championing the moral improvement of society. Each essay, signed with the pseudonymous The Rambler, bore the mark of its creator's gravity, insight, and stylistic rigor. Johnson's motive in founding The Rambler was twofold: to address the deficiencies he perceived in contemporary writing, and to offer readers ethical and philosophical guidance. Amid a landscape dominated by literary triviality and ephemeral entertainments, Johnson fashioned essays that grappled with perennial human concerns: virtue, vice, ambition, solitude, and the complexities of the heart. In doing so, he advanced a vision of literature not as mere diversion, but as a force for character formation and intellectual refinement. Johnson wrote the majority of the Rambler essays himself, displaying remarkable productivity and discipline. Each piece approached its chosen topic with logical clarity, rich classical allusion, and measured eloquence, unlike many periodical essays of the time, which indulged in frivolous wit or anecdotal whimsy. Johnson's compositions favored solemnity and introspection. He sought, above all, to inspire readers to self-examination and principled action. A defining feature of The Rambler was its preoccupation with morality, an arena in which Johnson felt literature could exert its greatest influence, whether exploring the pitfalls of pride or the rewards of perseverance. Johnson's essays reflected his conviction that the written word should both instruct and delight. He articulated a code of ethics that drew upon Christian doctrine, classical philosophy, and lived experience, blending these elements into a coherent, if sometimes austere, ideal of personal conduct. Beyond moral instruction, Johnson's work in The Rambler contributed significantly to the development of English prose. His sentences, renowned for their balance and syntactic complexity, exemplified a style that combined precision with grandeur. This mode of expression served not only to communicate ideas, but also to elevate the act of reading into a form of intellectual engagement. Throughout, Johnson remained wary of linguistic affectation, urging writers to eschew pretension in favor of authenticity and clarity. The Rambler also established Johnson as a public intellectual figure whose opinions on society, culture, and philosophy commanded attention and debate. The essays reached an audience beyond traditional literary circles, influencing the values and habits of citizens across Britain. Johnson addressed themes such as education, gender roles, and the tension between individual aspiration and communal responsibility, always with a view toward enhancing the common good. Johnson's approach was not without critics. Some contemporary readers found his solemnity excessive or his prescriptions unrealistic. Nonetheless, the enduring quality of his thought and eloquence outweighed such objections. Over time, The Rambler was recognized not merely as a literary enterprise, but as an institutional forum for ethical inquiry and cultural advancement. In addition to its immediate effect, The Rambler set a precedent for later periodical writing. Its commitment to seriousness, its intellectual ambition, and its stylistic integrity influenced publications such as The Idler, as well as the work of successors in the 19th century and beyond. Johnson's belief in the redemptive power of literature became a touchstone for generations of writers and thinkers. The legacy of The Rambler attests to Johnson's ability to shape the moral and intellectual horizons of his age. Through its pages, he challenged readers to reconsider the purpose of literature and to undertake a program of self-improvement. The essays remain, to this day, an exemplar of how writing can unite beauty and utility, art and principle. In illuminating the formative role of The Rambler in Johnson's career, we glimpse the full measure of his ambition to use literature as a scaffold for virtue, and to fashion a society in which thought and character are inextricably linked. Johnson's vision, both demanding and inspiring, elevated the status of English prose and set a course for thoughtful engagement with life's ultimate questions. Chapter 8: A Monument of Language, Creating the Dictionary. The creation of a dictionary of the English language endures as one of the most prodigious intellectual feats of the 18th century. Samuel Johnson's journey toward crafting this monument of language was not only an epic narrative of scholarly endeavor, but also a story of human perseverance, ingenuity, and passion for the English tongue. The genesis of the dictionary arose from a confluence of need and ambition. By the mid-1740s, English had become the language of commerce, science, and politics across Britain and its rapidly expanding empire. Yet, despite its prominence, English lacked the kind of systematic lexicon enjoyed by its continental counterparts. French and Italian dictionaries provided comprehensive references for their respective languages, while English remained fragmented, its rules and definitions haphazard and inconsistent. The booksellers of London, recognizing both a commercial and cultural opportunity, approached Johnson in 1746 with a proposal to undertake a project of singular scope, the compilation of a comprehensive dictionary of the English language. Johnson, already known for his literary prowess, agreed, projecting, with trademark audacity, a timeline of 3 years for its completion. In reality, the task would occupy him for nearly 9 years, draining his energies but transforming his reputation forever. Johnson's approach to lexicography was both innovative and deeply humanistic. Rather than simply inventorying words, he sought to capture the richness and variety of English as it was actually spoken and written. His method involved rigorous reading of canonical authors, extraction of illustrative quotations, and the formulation of definitions that, in many cases, reflected moral and philosophical judgments as much as linguistic precision. Johnson's dictionary, in this respect, was not an exercise in mere cataloguing, but an intellectual meditation on the history and character of English expression. The labor was arduous and Johnson's conditions were modest. With the help of a handful of amanuenses, he worked in cramped quarters on Gough Square, surrounded by stacks of texts and slips of paper. The process required extraordinary discipline, reading, and excerpting from thousands of works, organizing entries and crafting definitions that balanced accuracy with elegance. Johnson's capacity for concentration sustained him through periods of isolation, fatigue, and even despair. Central to Johnson's achievement was his insistence on anchoring definitions in usage rather than abstract prescription. By supplying copious citations from Shakespeare, Milton, Dryden, and others, he endowed each word with historical context and living meaning. His dictionary became not just a linguistic reference, but a repository of literary inheritance, a record of the language's evolution over centuries. Yet, Johnson's undertaking was not without its struggles. Financial difficulties dogged him throughout, and he often relied on advances or loans to sustain the project. Critics doubted whether such a mammoth task could be completed by a single individual. Nonetheless, Johnson persevered, driven by both necessity and a sense of mission. As the years wore on, Johnson's dictionary assumed the dimensions of a national enterprise. Intellectuals and ordinary citizens alike awaited its publication, anticipating not only a practical resource but also an affirmation of English cultural achievement. Johnson's preface to the dictionary, written with characteristic eloquence, set forth his philosophy. Language, though mutable, could be studied, celebrated, and understood as a reflection of human endeavor. The final product, published in 1755, into grand folio volumes, contained over 40,000 entries, each accompanied by carefully chosen examples. The work was immediately hailed as a triumph remarkable for its breadth, insight, and literary flavor. Johnson's definitions were at times witty, occasionally contentious, but always illuminating, revealing both the logic and the poetry inherent in English. The dictionary's impact transcended its practical utility. It established new standards for scholarship in England, inspired subsequent generations of lexicographers, and facilitated the spread of English throughout the world. Johnson's method anchoring words in usage and history became a blueprint for the study of language. In reflecting on the creation of the dictionary, one sees not only a scholar at work, but a man seeking to capture the soul of a nation's tongue. Johnson's labor united intellectual rigor with cultural reverence, producing a monument that still stands as a symbol of literary and linguistic ambition. His dictionary, in essence, was the culmination of his life's work, an enduring testament to the beauty, diversity, and vitality of English. Chapter 9: Definitions, Discipline, and Johnson's Unique Method. To examine the inner workings of Samuel Johnson's dictionary is to encounter a striking blend of scholarly discipline and creative individuality. Behind every entry lies not only Johnson's formidable intellect, but also a distinctive methodology that sets his work apart from all prior attempts at codifying language. Johnson approached the task of defining words with an intensity that bordered on philosophical inquiry. For him, a definition was not merely a statement of meaning, it was an exploration of usage, history, connotation, and even moral significance. Johnson's preoccupation with the nuances of meaning led him to reject the notion of fixed, immutable definitions. Instead, he recognized language as a living, evolving entity, one shaped by the needs, aspiration, and follies of its speakers. A hallmark of Johnson's method was his reliance on literary quotations, rather than relying solely on personal judgment or contemporary usage. Johnson scoured the works of major English authors Shakespeare, Milton, Pope, and extracted passages that illustrated the meaning and application of each word. The inclusion of these citations not only lent authority and depth to his definitions, but also underscored his conviction that language draws its vitality from literature. This method had profound implications. By rooting definitions in literary context, Johnson elevated dictionary compilation to a form of cultural preservation. His dictionary became, in essence, a compendium of English literary achievement, offering readers both linguistic guidance and aesthetic enjoyment. Moreover, Johnson's sensitivity to the historical development of words encouraged later lexicographers to adopt a more flexible, inclusive approach to their craft. Johnson's discipline extended far beyond method. The sheer volume of work demanded both stamina and organization. Johnson devised a system for recording and classifying entries, employing his assistants to copy out quotations onto slips of paper, which he then sorted into categories. He maintained a steady rhythm of labor, planning his days to maximize productivity despite frequent interruptions by bouts of melancholy or ill health. The process was not without its eccentricities. Johnson's own personality frequently colored his definitions, imparting a blend of solemnity, wit, and occasionally idiosyncratic judgment. Some entries, such as his famously humorous definition of lexicographer as a writer of dictionaries, a harmless drudge, revealed Johnson's capacity for self-reflection and satirical playfulness. Others delved deeply into etymological or philosophical matters, reflecting his broader intellectual preoccupations. Yet, Johnson's work was grounded in pragmatism. He acknowledged the limitations of his endeavor, openly admitting in his preface that perfection in defining words is unattainable given the mutable nature of language. His candor and humility resonated with readers, enhancing the credibility of his scholarship. Johnson's dictionary also reflected his commitment to clarity and utility. He strove to present definitions in lucid, accessible prose, resisting the temptation to indulge in obscurity or technical jargon. He aimed to furnish the ordinary English speaker with a reliable guide, enabling comprehension and proper usage across a variety of domains. Beyond the mechanics of definition, Johnson's work is marked by a larger vision, the belief in the civilizing and unifying power of language. He viewed the dictionary as an instrument of national cohesion, a means by which English speakers could recognize their shared heritage and communicate more effectively. In this respect, Johnson's endeavor transcended mere scholarship, encompassing a patriotic and humanistic mission. The discipline Johnson brought to his task was as much moral as intellectual. His perseverance in the face of adversity, his commitment to accuracy and fairness, and his refusal to compromise quality for expediency provide enduring examples of scholarly integrity. Johnson's method, though laborious and sometimes unconventional, set the gold standard for generations of lexicographers to come. Chapter 10: Definitions, Discipline, and Johnson's Unique Method. Samuel Johnson's journey toward creating his monumental A Dictionary of the English Language is emblematic of intellectual discipline and unyielding resolve. The 18th century was an age of linguistic ferment, and the English language, rich and adaptable though it was, suffered from inconsistencies and a lack of standardized norms. It was into this realm of uncertainty that Johnson stepped, intent on imposing order and coherence upon the unruly vocabulary of his native tongue. The genesis of the dictionary project was both pragmatic and ambitious. In 1746, a consortium of London booksellers approached Johnson with the proposal of a comprehensive English lexicon, one that would rival the prestige and thoroughness of French and Italian counterparts. Johnson accepted with characteristic gravity, estimating the task would require 3 years. Ultimately, the undertaking spanned nearly a decade, during which Johnson labored often alone, his only regular assistant a handful of amanuenses employed now and then. Johnson's method, as documented in his own remarks and in the pages of Boswell's Biography, was at once systematic and imaginative. He issued me a compilation, choosing instead to embed his definitions within the context of literary authority. Each word was illuminated not only by its literal meaning, but by its usage in the works of esteemed writers Shakespeare, Milton, Dryden, and others whose examples Johnson carefully selected. In this way, his dictionary became a repository of literary tradition, preserving not only the shape of words but the rhythms and values of English prose and poetry. Discipline was the cornerstone of Johnson's work. He devised a methodical approach, assembling thousands of slips or skuntlings, each bearing a word and its quoted lines. Surrounded by piles of books in his modest Gough Square garret, Johnson moved through language with both precision and creativity. He was compelled not merely by the mechanics of meaning, but by the idiosyncrasies and beauties of the English tongue. The process was exhausting, punctuated by bouts of melancholy, physical ailments, and the grinding realities of poverty. Yet Johnson pressed on, driven by an abiding sense of duty to the culture and future of English letters. Johnson's definitions were more than dry catalogues. They were animated by wit, humor, and sometimes a touch of self-reflection. His famous definition of lexicographer as a harmless drudge is both playful and poignant, suggesting an awareness of the labor's isolation and its refusal of public glory. Other entries blend erudition with subtle commentary, exposing Johnson's keen perceptions about society, morality, and human nature. In the realm of discipline, Johnson's achievements were not limited to his scholarship. He embodied a mental rigor exemplified by his daily routines, his resilience in the face of adversity, and his refusal to succumb to the temptations of ease or complacency. The methodology he invented, a blend of literary research, citation, and painstaking revision, set a standard followed by lexicographers for centuries. Johnson's innovative fusion of authority, evidence, and personal insight transcended mere dictionary making and helped usher in the modern age of linguistic study. Johnson's method highlights his dual role as both scholar and artist. By anchoring his definitions in literary sources, he acknowledged the dynamic evolution of language, embracing its capacity for adaptation and change. Through discipline and creativity, Johnson sculpted the contours of English, ensuring that his dictionary would serve not only as a reference, but as a testament to the living nature of words. The legacy of this unique approach is profound. Johnson's dictionary redefined how language might be studied, a blueprint for intellectual diligence, as much as for linguistic mastery. It stands as both a monument to one man's commitment and an enduring guide for all who seek clarity, beauty, and meaning in the rich tapestry of English speech. Chapter 11. The Dictionary's Publication and Global Impact. The publication of a dictionary of the English language in 1755 marked a watershed moment, not merely for English lexicography but for the intellectual infrastructure of the world. Johnson's magnum opus, the fruit of 9 years' labor, emerged as a 2-volume folio of formidable size and scholarly rigor, immediately establishing itself as the preeminent reference work for English vocabulary. The process of publication itself was fraught with trials. Johnson, frequently beset by financial constraints, relied upon the patronage of booksellers and a handful of associated benefactors, most notably Lord Chesterfield, whose lukewarm involvement became a source of personal disappointment for Johnson. The difficulties of printing and proofreading such a massive text were compounded by the physical and emotional burden borne by the author. Nevertheless, the dictionary was received with acclaim, its scope and substance resonating with scholars, writers, and the educated public. The dictionary's immediate impact on English letters was multifaceted. Academics praised its systematic approach to definition, the depth of literary citation, and the innovative attempt to present language as an evolving cultural artifact. Johnson's method elevated lexicography, transforming it from mere word listing to a discipline grounded in textual authority. The dictionary served as a repository of English literature within its pages, promoting the works of canonical authors through its examples and, thereby, reinforcing their status in the literary canon. The influence of Johnson's dictionary was profound and far-reaching. It quickly became a vital tool for writers, journalists, and students, offering clarity amid the swirling uncertainties of English usage. Courts and legal scholars referenced Johnson's definitions in matters of interpretation. Poets and playwrights found inspiration or correction in its pages. The dictionary was disseminated well beyond London, reaching the American colonies and, through translation and adaptation, influencing lexicographical work on the continent. In terms of global impact, Johnson's dictionary played a crucial role in the standardization of English worldwide. As the British Empire expanded, the need for a common linguistic frame became ever more pressing. Johnson's work offered a shared vocabulary and a normative set of grammatical rules, facilitating communication, commerce, and governance. The dictionary's prestige endowed the English language with a sense of dignity and intellectual rigor, assisting its ascent as a global lingua franca. Over time, the dictionary became a cornerstone of education, adopted by universities and schools as the authoritative guide to English definitions and usage. Its examples continued to shape literary interpretation, while its careful distinctions encouraged precision in writing and speech. Johnson's approach to language, respecting both tradition and innovation, helped propel English into modernity, promoting an openness to new terms and usages without abandoning clarity or discipline. Johnson's dictionary was not without its critics. Some found fault with the occasional omission or idiosyncratic definitions. Others lamented the lack of scientific precision or the subjectivity evident in certain entries. Yet these critiques pale in comparison to the dictionary's enduring legacy. Its blend of erudition, wit, and scholarly methods set a benchmark that subsequent lexicographers aspired to match. Even as the field evolved to incorporate new technologies and linguistic theories, the dictionary's relevance and reputation only grew with time. In the 19th century, it became the foundation for further lexicographical enterprises, such as the Oxford English Dictionary. Johnson's principles' emphasis on context, literary citation, and nuanced definition inspired generations of compilers, educators, and thinkers. The dictionary remains a monument to intellectual ambition and achievement, its global impact continuing unabated as English persists as an essential medium of international dialogue. Thus, the publication of Johnson's dictionary was more than an academic event. It was a moment of cultural transformation. The work invited humanity to reflect upon language as both a vehicle of thought and an artifact of civilization. Its global reach and lasting influence affirmed the enduring power of intellect, applied with discipline, imagination, and purpose. Chapter 12. Johnson the Critic, Essays, Poems, and Literary Judgments. Samuel Johnson's intellect found its most vibrant expression not only within the lexicographer's garret but across the landscape of essays, poems, and robust literary criticism. His role as a critic was neither ancillary nor episodic. It was, instead, central to his self-conception and public reputation. The Rambler, the Idler, and the Adventurer. Johnson's major essay series constitute some of the finest examples of 18th century English prose. In these publications, Johnson employed the essay as a vehicle for social, moral, and literary inquiry. His style, marked by clarity and gravitas, was at once accessible and intellectually demanding. He addressed a panoply of subjects, from the cultivation of virtue and the perils of procrastination, to the dynamics of friendship and the nature of happiness. Each essay stands as a testament to Johnson's ability to dissect the human experience, offering observations serenely balanced between skepticism and hope. As a poet, Johnson's works blend the classical with the personal. His long poem, The Vanity of Human Wishes, adapts Juvenal's satire to 18th century England, lamenting the futility of ambition and the universal certainty of suffering. Johnson's verse is distinguished by its moral seriousness and analytic intensity. The poem's couplets resound with philosophical insight, articulating a vision that is at once somber and humane. Poetry for Johnson was not merely ornamentation but a medium for reflection, caution and counsel. Johnson's literary criticism, most notably presented in the prefaces to his works and in the lives of the poets, demonstrates a rare combination of judgment and empathy. He approached literary evaluation with a firm but fair hand, eschewing both excessive condemnation and uncritical praise. His essays on Milton, Dryden, Pope, and others offer detailed analyses of style, motif, and moral purpose. Johnson's commitment to both the aesthetic and ethical dimensions of literature made his judgments enduringly relevant. He considered not only the technical skill of authors but the resonance of their writing with the collective aspiration and anxieties of society. Central to Johnson's criticism was his belief in literature's instructive power. He regarded fiction and poetry as capable or, indeed, obligated to enlarge the reader's wisdom and moral discernment. Yet Johnson was not dogmatic in his approach. His essays reveal a keen awareness of pleasure, imagination, and the necessity of artistic freedom. He allowed for a variety of tastes and the unpredictability of genius, cautioning against rigid systems or the neglect of individual intuition. Johnson's literary judgments were always underpinned by a rich knowledge of books, traditions, and historical context. He read voraciously, referencing works across languages and centuries. His critical method was comparative, rigorous, and suffused with personal reflection. Regard for the author's difficulty, sympathy for the limitations imposed by circumstance, and devotion to truth animated his essays, which remain exemplars of thoughtful criticism. In sum, Johnson's contributions as a critic, essayist, and poet are distinguished by their seriousness of purpose, their breadth of inquiry, and their commitment to balancing judgment with understanding. His work continues to inform literary study, challenging readers and writers alike to pursue excellence not only in technique but in the depth and quality of their ideas. His literary judgments remind us that criticism, at its best, is an act of dialogue, a search for wisdom in the midst of art. Chapter 13. The Lives of the Poets, a New Standard in Biography. The Lives of the Poets stands as one of Samuel Johnson's most significant achievements, redefining the art and purpose of biography. In this multi-volume work, Johnson immortalized not merely the creative accomplishments, but also the complex personalities and circumstances of more than 50 English-language poets, spanning from the 17th to the early 18th centuries. Prior to Johnson, biography had largely confined itself to factual chronicle dates, names, brief anecdotes. Johnson's approach was revolutionary. He integrated critical analysis with psychological insight, weaving together narrative, evaluation, and moral reflection. Each life, while meticulously researched, was filtered through Johnson's discerning intellect, providing readers not just with history but with character studies that reflected the broader ambitions, follies, and trials of human existence. Johnson's biographies are notable for their blend of empathy and candor. He approached his subjects with keen sensitivity to their talents and flaws. Some Milton, Dryden, Pope emerge as titans, celebrated for their poetic innovation and mastery of form. Yet Johnson does not shy away from noting errors, excesses, or stylistic limitations. His verdicts, though sometimes controversial, were invariably grounded in literary principles and a desire for truth rather than mere adulation. Structurally, The Lives of the Poets integrates biography with criticism. Johnson examines each poet's major works, identifying the evolution of styles and the relation of poetry to social and philosophical contexts. He places particular emphasis on the interplay between the writer's personal circumstances and artistic achievements, the poet's upbringing, health, finances, and friendship soul are considered factors that shape the mind and craft of the individual. Johnson's biographical method is rigorous yet humane. He avoids the hagiographic impulse, balancing praise with insight into struggle and failure. His narrative is enlivened by anecdote and by the judicious inclusion of primary sources' letters, interviews, eyewitness accounts. The result is a genre that transcends its origins, transforming biography into a serious literary art form. Importantly, Johnson's work set a new standard for how literary lives might be chronicled. He established the expectation that biography should seek to illuminate character, alongside achievement, that the inner workings of genius, the patterns of doubt and determination, were fundamental to understanding art itself. Biographers who followed in his footsteps, Boswell, Carlyle, Lytton Strachey, owed much to Johnson's pioneering model. The lives of the poets also reflects Johnson's own values and anxieties, the recurring motifs of perseverance, the price of fame, and the inevitability of disappointment all echo Johnson's struggles. His writing is marked by sympathy for the labor of creation, by an abiding respect for intellect and discipline, and by measured skepticism regarding the mercurial fortunes of artists. Through his biographies, Johnson provided not only portraits of the poets, but mirrors in which readers could contemplate their own aspiration, setbacks and redemptions. Ultimately, the Lives of the Poets stands as more than a compendium of literary history. It is a meditation on genius, character, and the enduring dialogue between art and life. Johnson's blend of narrative, criticism, and insight established biography as a central genre of a literary understanding and legacy that persists into the present. Chapter 14, Faith, Doubt, and Johnson's Inner Struggles. Beneath the armor of Johnson's scholarly accomplishment lay a soul deeply engaged with questions of faith and doubt, in a landscape marked by anxiety, longing, and extraordinary fortitude. The interplay of certainty and uncertainty in Johnson's spiritual life emerges as one of the richest themes in his writing, offering profound insight into the complexities of the human condition. Johnson's religious background was shaped by the Anglican tradition, though his approach to faith was anything but unreflective. He practiced regular prayer, church attendance, and charity, often in secret. Yet, his diaries and letters disclose persistent struggles with belief and morality. Johnson's spirituality was characterized by oscillation, a pendulum swinging between moments of assurance and episodes of grave doubt. By his own admission, he was haunted by fears of divine judgment, personal failing, and inadequacy in repentance. Johnson's inner turmoil is palpably expressed in his prayers and meditations, a work that reveals his vulnerability, humility, and dependency on grace. The text brims with pleas for forgiveness, renewal, and perseverance, words that reflect both a disciplined faith and an awareness of imperfection. Johnson's habit of self-examination, though rigorous, was also a source of torment, suggesting a conscience acutely sensitive to the demands of belief. The relationship between faith and intellect in Johnson's life was complex. He was skeptical of dogmatism, critical of superstition, and resistant to fashionable deism or secularism. He respected reason as a tool for spiritual inquiry, embracing debate and questioning as vital to genuine faith. At the same time, Johnson rejected the notion that reason alone could satisfy the soul's deepest needs. He saw religion as a force for charity, humility, and personal transformation, but remained exquisitely aware of its demands and mysteries. Johnson was not immune to melancholy or despair. His mental health, marked by recurring depression and insomnia, sometimes aggravated his anxieties about salvation and meaning. Nonetheless, Johnson's ability to persevere amid these challenges is a testament to his moral courage. He did not evade struggle. He confronted it directly, seeking solace and understanding in prayer, reflection, and conversation. Faith and doubt for Johnson were not opposites but companion forces. He believed that uncertainty, far from disqualifying the believer, was integral to the life of the mind. Rigorous self-examination, honest questioning, and a willingness to endure ambiguity were virtues he espoused. This perspective found its way into his literary criticism, biography, and social commentary. Johnson's search for truth was always bound up in the acknowledgement of limitation and the necessity of hope. The influence of Johnson's spiritual journey extends beyond theology. His writings provide readers with a model for the integration of intellect and conscience, for facing adversity with honesty, and for finding dignity amid doubt. Johnson's inner struggles are neither concealed nor romanticized. They are, rather, unfolded as part of the broader human drama and ongoing quest for meaning, belonging, and grace. In Johnson's mature thought, faith and doubt are reconciled in charity, the active love of neighbor, the patient bearing of suffering, and the acceptance of human frailty. Johnson's legacy in this domain is profound, not as one whose beliefs were immune to question, but as one whose humanity was shaped by ongoing engagement with the mysteries of mind and heart. Chapter 15. Conversation as Art, Johnson's Wit and Wisdom. Samuel Johnson's abilities as a conversationalist became legendary among his contemporaries, and have been immortalized in the annals of literary history. To Johnson, conversation was not merely an exchange of information, but a cultivated art, a theatre for wit, persuasion, and the shaping of public opinion. From coffee houses to private parlors, Johnson's presence was formidable. He was celebrated for both his sharp intellect and his capacity for humor, paradox, and spontaneous insight. James Boswell, Johnson's devoted biographer, meticulously recorded these exchanges, presenting Johnson's remarks as a kind of living literature. When Dr. Johnson spoke, wrote one acquaintance, he not only taught but delighted. He appeared born to teach and to please. Johnson's style in conversation was distinctive, assertive yet reflective, sometimes abrupt but usually charitable. He avoided empty flattery, preferring honest debate that could clarify ideas and reveal error. Johnson's response to Boswell's flattery, "Sir, I am not uncivil. I should be very sorry not to be civil, but I am not civil for civility's sake," captures his disdain for mere social convention. For Johnson, the aim was truth, however uncomfortable. Yet Johnson's wit was not mere cleverness. It was infused with wisdom, observation, and occasionally satire. His ability to puncture pride, expose folly, or deflate pretension was balanced by genuine concern for reason and the well-being of his interlocutors. Johnson's conversation ranged widely: literature, ethics, history, religion, politics, and mundane trivia all received their due. His remarks could be trenchant or tender, anecdotal or philosophical, depending on the mood and company. Among Johnson's circle, conversation became a kind of laboratory for ideas. The meetings of the literary club, whose members included Edmund Burke, Joshua Reynolds, Oliver Goldsmith, and David Garrick, were arenas for lively exchange, critique, and the testing of argument. Johnson cherished such gatherings, matching his formidable intellect with others and refining his thoughts in the crucible of discussion. Johnson was also renowned for his capacity to listen, inquire, and dignify the opinions of others. Though given to assertiveness, he rarely dismissed ideas out of hand. Instead, he demanded intellectual honesty and the willingness to engage in sustained argument. This discipline contributed to his reputation as a sage, a thinker not merely of solitary brilliance but of collective dialogue. Johnson's conversational accomplishments extended beyond wit and intellect to the sphere of morality. He often used conversation to encourage the downcast, offer counsel to friends in difficulty, and dispel the loneliness of those marginalized by society. His practical wisdom advice on education, conduct, and poverty was delivered with empathy and a sense of duty. Johnson's art of conversation was thus inseparable from his moral commitments and his deep concern for the flourishing of others. Today, Johnson's reputation as a conversationalist serves as a reminder of the power of language to shape communities, challenge error, and deepen understanding. His wit and wisdom demonstrate that conversation, at its best, is an exercise in mutual respect, an art that fuses intellect, imagination, and charity. Johnson's legacy as a master of conversation continues to inspire, inviting us to embrace dialogue not only as entertainment, but as a vehicle for truth and friendship. Chapter 16. Boswell and Johnson, a friendship for the ages. Among the annals of literary partnerships, few rival the profound connection between Samuel Johnson and James Boswell. Their friendship encapsulates much more than mere companionship. It is a tapestry woven from threads of wit, intellectual exchange, and mutual respect, set against the backdrop of 18th century Britain, friendship that would ultimately shape our understanding of one of the era's greatest minds. Samuel Johnson first met James Boswell in London on May 16, 1763. Boswell, 22 years Johnson's junior, was a young Scottish lawyer and aspiring writer, brimming with enthusiasm for the English literary elite. Johnson, already celebrated for his essays, dictionary, and critical works, was initially guarded. Boswell's persistent charm and earnest admiration, however, soon broke through Johnson's crusty exterior. That initial encounter, marked by Boswell's famous question, "May I have the honor of waiting on you, sir?" was the genesis of a friendship that would stretch over to decades and change the course of literary biography. Boswell was drawn to Johnson's prodigious intellect and moral gravity. Johnson, in turn, appreciated Boswell's vivacity, curiosity, and unwavering devotion. It was a friendship of contrasts. Johnson, the towering, sometimes intimidating sage with a penchant for moralizing. Boswell, the effervescent, sometimes wayward enthusiast in search of guidance and affirmation. Much has been made of Johnson's gruff demeanor, but in Boswell's presence his kindness, patience, and humor consistently surfaced. Their exchanges, documented meticulously by Boswell in letters, diaries, and ultimately in his landmark Life of Samuel Johnson, reveal a friendship grounded in mutual improvement and affection. The period literature and correspondence reveal Johnson as a formidable conversationalist, one whose voice dominated the social and intellectual circles of London. Boswell eagerly recorded Johnson's sayings, providing insight into his mentor's thoughts on morality, society, and the human condition. Johnson's ability to combine moral seriousness with wit made his company both edifying and entertaining. Those fortunate enough to witness their dialogues at the Mitre Tavern or amid the bustle of Fleet Street recount the animated interplay between Johnson's principled gravitas and Boswell's irrepressible cheer, a microcosm of Enlightenment debate in full vigor. Boswell's dedication to Johnson went beyond mere reportage. He became Johnson's confidant, advocating for his health and well-being, and accompanying him on journeys that would expand both their intellectual horizons. Their famous expedition to Scotland and the Hebrides, for instance, was an adventure that revealed both the strengths and idiosyncrasies of their relationship. Boswell's admiration for Johnson was profound. He described Johnson as the greatest man of any age, but he did not hesitate to challenge or disagree with his mentor, prompting spirited debate that showcased the best of both men's intellects. This companionship was not without its strains. Johnson's bouts of melancholy and physical illness would sometimes make him withdrawn and difficult. Boswell, sensitive and dependent upon Johnson's approval, would occasionally feel slighted or insecure. Yet, in spite of these moments, theirs was a friendship of resilience, a testament to the enduring power of shared purpose and admiration. Johnson's willingness to guide Boswell, offering both sage advice and stern rebuke, helped shape Boswell's own moral compass and literary ambition. The crowning achievement of this friendship was Boswell's Life of Samuel Johnson, published in 1791, 6 years after Johnson's death. Drawing from years of detailed diaries and personal experience, Boswell constructed what would become one of the most celebrated biographies in English letters. His account preserves Johnson's mannerisms, speech, prejudices, and brilliance in a manner unprecedented at the time. More than mere chronicling, Boswell painted a vivid and complex portrait, using their relationship as a lens through which to study Johnson's mind and soul. This biography, rich in detail and humanity, transformed the genre and forever enshrined the memory of Samuel Johnson for posterity. The friendship between Johnson and Boswell provides a model of intellectual camaraderie, one marked by honest exchange, humor, and mutual edification. Its influence endures, not only through Boswell's biography, but in the recognition of friendship as a vital context for personal and philosophical growth. In exploring their connection, we are invited to consider the role that dialogue, vulnerability, and loyalty can play in the lives of great minds. For Johnson and Boswell, the friendship was more than a social convenience. It was the crucible in which ideas, character, and legacy were refined. Chapter 17 travels with a sharp eye, Scotland and the Hebrides. Samuel Johnson's journey through Scotland and the Hebrides in 1773 stands as one of the most remarkable expeditions of literary history. Accompanied by James Boswell, Johnson at the age of 63 undertook a rugged and revealing adventure that would challenge his preconceptions, illuminate his affinity for landscape and culture, and ultimately yield to complementary masterpieces. Johnson's A Journey to the Western Islands of Scotland and Boswell's Journal of a Tour to the Hebrides. The context of their journey was both personal and intellectual. Johnson, a proud Londoner and self-styled critic of Scotland, had long harboured scepticism about Scottish culture, language, and traditions, a sentiment not uncommon among English intellectuals of his day. Boswell, a passionate Scot, desired for Johnson to experience and appreciate the beauty and virtues of his homeland. Thus, the journey became both a test of friendship and an exercise in cultural exploration. Their travels began in Edinburgh, with Johnson immediately making an impression upon the city's literati. He engaged in spirited debates about philosophy, religion, and the distinctiveness of Scottish identity. As they moved northward, the pair encountered a society shaped by clan structures, Gaelic language, and the customs of Highland life markedly different from metropolitan England. Johnson's sharp observational skills and robust curiosity came into full play. As he chronicled each landscape, castle, and character, Johnson was moved by the rugged isolation and simplicity of the Highlands. Finding both beauty and melancholy in their vistas, he described the wild and mountainous regions with poetic vision, but also with a practical eye for detail, considering local economy, governance, and education. His reflections on the Hebrides are especially vivid, portraying islands buffeted by sea and tradition, where modernity had yet to fully intrude. Through his writing, Johnson gave voice to the dignity and resilience of Scottish communities. Even as he critiqued aspects of their backwardness, the tour was not without adventure, discomfort, or incident. The travelers braved treacherous weather, primitive lodgings, and unpredictable transportation. Their evenings were filled with conversation, Boswell prompting Johnson with questions on everything from Highland customs to philosophical inquiries about society and faith. Johnson's fairness in judgment is evident. He condemned injustices when he found them, but he also expressed generosity towards people and customs that defied his earlier prejudices. At the heart of this journey was Johnson's ability to see with both the critical eye of a moralist and the tender eye of a poet. He was fascinated by the persistence of ancient traditions and the Gaelic language, even as he advocated for reform and enlightenment. Johnson's reflections on the value of education, the role of women, and the struggles of rural life underscore his engagement with the lived realities of his hosts, not simply the aesthetics of their landscape. Moreover, the interactions between Johnson and Boswell during their travels reveal further depths of their relationship. Boswell, sometimes exasperated by Johnson's criticism or eccentricities, nevertheless found himself learning, adapting, and growing through the experience. Johnson's insistence on intellectual rigor and honesty became a model for Boswell's own literary methods. Their journey thus forged new layers of understanding and mutual respect, recorded in the journals that would later captivate generations of readers. The works emerging from the journey: Johnson's A Journey to the Western Islands of Scotland and Boswell's Journal of a Tour to the Hebrides offer contrasting perspectives. Johnson's account is dignified, thoughtful, and philosophical, exploring the deeper meanings behind cultural phenomena. Boswell's is lively, anecdotal, and richly detailed, capturing the spirit of their adventures and the humor of their exchanges. Together, these texts illuminate both the physical journey through Scotland and the intellectual journey, undertaken by two remarkable minds. The significance of Johnson's Scottish travels reaches far beyond personal experience. His willingness to question assumptions, adapt his views, and record his findings with honesty and humility has become a model for intellectual engagement. With other cultures, the expedition highlights the importance of curiosity, empathy, and open-mindedness in shaping one's worldview, a lesson that resonates as powerfully today as it did in the age of Johnson and Boswell. Johnson's Travels with a Sharp Eye is more than a historical narrative. It represents the fusion of character, intellect, and friendship. In tracing the journey from Edinburgh to the remote Isles, we witness not only landscapes transformed, but also minds expanded, reminding us that the true measure of travel lies in its power to refine our vision and broaden our humanity. Chapter 18. Johnson's Influence on English Morality and Language. Samuel Johnson's impact on English morality and language is without parallel. Through his essays, conversations, and especially his dictionary, Johnson became not just a chronicler of language but a shaper of national consciousness. His enduring legacy in these realms was forged by an unwavering commitment to truth, virtue, and the expressive power of words. Johnson's moral vision was shaped by a blend of Christian doctrine, Enlightenment rationalism, and personal experience of suffering and resilience. His writings reflect a profound engagement with the ethical dilemmas of his age: poverty, virtue, vice, ambition, and death. In works such as The Rambler, The Idler, and The Adventurer, Johnson explored the complexities of human character, advocating for sincerity, fortitude, and charity while warning against the perils of pride, idleness, and self-deception. His essays, published in the periodical press, became a moral compass for middle-class England. Johnson's style balances eloquence with practicality. He is neither a remote philosopher nor a mere preacher, but a guide for everyday life. His reflections on topics as varied as ambition and friendship reach into the heart of the human condition, offering wisdom grounded in experience and empathy. Through his moralizing, Johnson encouraged readers to cultivate self-awareness, discipline, and kindness, a message that resonated in an age grappling with rapid social change. Equally significant is Johnson's work as a lexicographer, with a dictionary of the English language, first published in 1755. Johnson undertook the Herculean task of cataloguing and defining the words of English. More than a technical achievement, the dictionary became an instrument of cultural identity and intellectual maturity. Johnson's definitions are notable for their clarity, wit, and occasional moralism. He did not simply list meanings but provided guidance on usage, context, and morality. The dictionary helped standardize English spelling and vocabulary, created a common reference point for education and literature, and gave readers tools to more fully engage with the language of commerce, law, and poetry. Johnson understood language as more than communication. It was a reflection of national character and individual morality. He saw the search for precise meaning as an ethical endeavor, emphasizing the need for honesty and rigor in both speech and writing. His work continues to influence lexicography and literary criticism, setting standards for clarity, truthfulness, and nuance that remain strengths of English language discourse. Beyond the dictionary, Johnson's spoken and written words shaped the linguistic style of the era. His conversational acumen, preserved in Boswell's recordings, offers countless examples of elegant phrasing, aphorisms, and wise counsel. Johnson's capacity to combine moral criticism with linguistic ingenuity rendered him a unique public intellectual, whose judgments were sought on every matter from politics to poetry. Critically, Johnson's influence on English morality was not dogmatic or exclusionary. He acknowledged complexity and contradiction, recognizing human weakness while aspiring to higher standards of conduct. His essays and poems frequently blend hope with humility, urging readers to pursue improvement while forgiving imperfection. Johnson's own struggles with melancholy, illness, and doubt gave his moral advice a tone of authenticity and gentleness absent in more severe exhortations. Johnson's legacy in shaping both morals and language survives not merely in his texts but in their ongoing resonance. His call for linguistic precision and moral seriousness continues to inform educational curricula, literary criticism, and social discourse in the English-speaking world. The dictionary, now a historical artifact, remains a monument to the fusion of intellect and conscience. In sum, Johnson's influence lies in his ability to elevate English thought and language. Through his moral philosophy and linguistic achievements, he provided tools for understanding oneself and society, and for aspiring to the ideals of clarity, honesty, and compassion. His writings remain a beacon for those who seek to navigate the complexities of language and life with integrity and purpose. Chapter 19: The Final Years, Reflection, Illness, and Legacy. Samuel Johnson's final years were marked by a profound interplay of reflection, illness, and a shaping of his enduring legacy. The period between the publication of his major works and his death in 1784 reveals a man deeply engaged with philosophical and theological questions, confronting physical decline with resilience and grace. These years, though shadowed by suffering, illuminate the extraordinary strength and wisdom that defined Johnson's character. Johnson's health had always been fragile. Throughout his life, he struggled with various ailments, scrofula in youth, severe depression, and, later, a combination of respiratory and cardiac complaints. By the 1780s, these afflictions had intensified, leaving him physically weak and yet mentally undiminished. He continued to write, correspond, and contribute to intellectual life in London, attending literary gatherings at the homes of friends such as Sir Joshua Reynolds and Edmund Burke. His conversation retained its vigor, even as his body failed him. His home in Bolt Court, Fleet Street, became both sanctuary and stage where Johnson entertained friends, received visitors, and reflected on his past achievements and limitations. Boswell's journals testified to Johnson's candor and warmth during these years. Though sometimes impatient and melancholic, he remained interested in the welfare of others, offering advice and encouragement to young writers and acquaintances. Johnson's reflections during this time are poignant. He became increasingly interested in theology and the nature of mortality, writing essays on the soul, the afterlife, and the duties of humanity. His prayers, letters, and private meditations reveal a man wrestling with uncertainty yet sustained by faith. Johnson's acceptance of suffering, his own and that of others, is remarkable. He regarded physical and mental trials as opportunities for moral improvement, advising patience and hope even in moments of despair. Professional recognition continued. Johnson was honored by the king with a pension in 1762, and his status as the nation's public intellectual only grew. He maintained correspondence with luminaries such as Hester Thrale and Oliver Goldsmith, guiding and mentoring rising writers. Johnson's circle of friends provided comfort and stimulation, helping him to ward off isolation and melancholy in his last years. Yet, loss and illness were constant companions. Several close friends died during this period, including the poet Goldsmith and the physician Richard Brocklesby. Johnson was keenly aware of the fleeting nature of life. His writing, especially his poetry, began to focus more explicitly on mortality, memory, and legacy. He drew up his will, arranged for the publication of his works, and took care to pass on intellectual and moral advice to posterity. The closing months of Johnson's life were difficult but dignified. He was attended faithfully by medical professionals and friends, refusing unnecessary treatments and maintaining his independence of mind. On December 13, 1784, Johnson died at the age of 75, surrounded by loved ones and mourned throughout Britain. His funeral at Westminster Abbey was a public event, attended by writers and statesmen who recognized his extraordinary contributions. Johnson's legacy is vast. Through his dictionary, essays, poems, and letters, he shaped the development of the English lexicon and thought. Through his friendships and mentorships, he inspired generations of writers. His capacity for self-examination, his humility in the face of suffering, and his commitment to honesty and virtue have become hallmarks of the British intellectual tradition. For modern readers, Johnson's final years offer lessons in resilience, dignity, and hope. His willingness to face illness and death with honesty, neither denying nor dramatizing his suffering, demonstrates an approach to adversity that remains inspiring. Johnson teaches us not only how to live well, but how to accept life's limitations without bitterness or despair. Ultimately, the last chapter of Johnson's life is not one of decline, but of extraordinary fulfillment. In reflection, illness, and legacy, he forged standards of character and intellect that continue to shape the English-speaking world. The lessons of his final years, rich in insight and humanity, extend beyond biography, inviting all who study his works to cultivate compassion, wisdom, and joy even in the face of life's greatest trials. Chapter 20. The Dictionary That Shaped the English-Speaking World. In April 1755, Samuel Johnson, already regarded as a formidable voice in the bustling intellectual culture of London, completed an extraordinary task, a dictionary of the English language. Before Johnson, dictionaries existed, but none had unified the complex and evolving vocabulary of English, or sought with such ambition and scholarly rigor to capture the living language as it was used, written and spoken. The monumental project spanned nearly 9 years. Johnson worked largely alone, assisted by a handful of copyists, in an age before such reference works could call upon large academies or state support. The enterprise relied on Johnson's prodigious energy, discipline, and devotion. Johnson's dictionary contained over 40,000 entries, words meticulously defined, illustrated with apt quotations drawn from the best writers from Chaucer to Milton. Unlike his predecessors, Johnson understood that a dictionary was not simply a utilitarian catalogue, but a living repository of culture. His method was at once rigorous and humanistic. Johnson believed that to truly understand a word, its meanings must be illuminated by context, hence his reliance on literary quotations. This practice elevated the dictionary beyond a mere list of definitions. It became a window into the wit, wisdom, and beauty of English literature. The impact of Johnson's dictionary was immediate and profound. Before its publication, lexical confusion reigned. Spelling, usage, and meaning varied widely. Johnson provided a standard, a model of clarity and precision. His work was quickly adopted by writers, scholars, and educators, becoming the lodestar for subsequent dictionaries, including the Oxford English Dictionary, which would emerge more than a century later. Yet, Johnson's dictionary was more than an academic achievement, it was an act of creative authorship. Many definitions display Johnson's unique blend of learning and wit. His entry for network reads anything reticulated or decussated at equal distances, with interstices between the intersections. For lexicographer, he quipped, "A writer of dictionaries, a harmless drudge, that busies himself in tracing the original and detailing the signification of words." Through such touches, Johnson infused the dictionary with his personality, offering not just facts but commentary, reflection, and, at times, humor. The lexicographical endeavor was not without controversy. Some critics accused Johnson of prescriptivism, favoring select forms over regional or popular usages. Johnson himself recognized the tension between codifying and reflecting language. In his preface, he wrote with humility of the dictionary's limitations, observing that no dictionary is perfect and that languages live and change. Rather than enforcing rules, his aim was clarity and understanding. Johnson's work also reflected the intellectual spirit of his age. The dictionary was a product of Enlightenment reason, striving for order amidst chaos, seeking to impose discernment on the fluid boundaries of language. Through his definitions, Johnson participated in the ongoing debates about meaning, usage, and the nature of communication, questions that resonate to this day. The dictionary's influence extended far beyond academia. It became a tool of empire and education, helping to unify administrative, commercial, and cultural life in Britain and its colonies. Indigenous tongues and regional dialects were often eclipsed, subsumed by the rising standard of Johnsonian English. In time, this process would spark debates about linguistic imperialism and resistance, which continue to animate scholars and activists. For Johnson, the task of lexicography was at heart of philosophical enterprise. Language, he believed, was the medium of thought, the fabric of society, the foundation of civilization. To organize language was to shape the world. Johnson's dictionary thus stands, not merely as a milestone in the history of reference works, but as a monument to the belief that words matter, that their meanings carry the weight of human experience, intellect, and aspiration. As we reflect on the legacy of Johnson's dictionary, its significance endures. The standardization he initiated enabled new levels of communication, learning, and creativity. Writers found in it a resource for precision and inspiration. Educators relied on it to foster literacy and eloquence. And through its pages, generations of readers have glimpsed the mind of Samuel Johnson, a mind at once rigorous and playful, devoted to the liberation and illumination that comes from understanding words.